The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Zethkar's forearms trembled while holding the sensor report. For 1,000 years, the empty coordinates where Earth once orbited had been a mystery that haunted the galaxy's greatest minds. The third planet of the Sol system had simply vanished without explanation, leaving behind only empty space and unanswered questions. "Are you certain of these readings?" High Chancellor Morden asked, her crystalline voice echoing through the vast chamber. Representatives from 47 different species sat in stunned silence, their various forms of breathing creating an otherworldly symphony of anticipation. Zethkar nodded slowly, his reptilian features showing unmistakable fear. The Deep Space Monitoring Station at Proxima detected massive spatial distortions 3 cycles ago. Something large is returning to the Sol system, something the size of a planet. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had spent centuries studying the disappearance of humanity's homeworld suddenly faced the impossible reality of its return. The Veltari delegation chittered nervously among themselves, while the massive Gron representatives shifted their bulk uneasily. Even the ancient ethereals, beings of pure energy who rarely showed emotion, flickered with obvious distress, and Dr. Yixin, the galaxy's foremost expert on human culture and the disappeared Earth, floated forward in her containment suit. The aquatic scientist had dedicated her entire career to studying the vanished world and its inhabitants. If Earth is truly returning, we must consider what this means for galactic stability. Humanity was unique among spacefaring species. The understatement sent ripples of nervous energy through the assembly. Every species present knew the stories of humanity's brief but explosive emergence into galactic society. In less than 2 centuries, humans had gone from primitive radio signals to becoming one of the most influential species in known space. Their adaptability, creativity, and sheer stubborn determination had made them both valuable allies and dangerous enemies. "They were warriors without equal," growled Commander Thaknus of the Korthax Empire. "In the Hegemony Wars, a single human fleet held off 3 of our battle groups for 6 months. 6 months. Their tactics were unlike anything we had ever encountered. They were also peacemakers," countered Ambassador Lyriana of the Peaceful Consortium. "Human diplomats ended the century war between the Zephyrians and the Mantid Collective. They had an unusual ability to understand different perspectives and find common ground." High Chancellor Morden raised her crystalline hand for silence. "Regardless of our past experiences with humanity, we must focus on the present situation. If Earth is returning after 1,000 years, we need to understand why it disappeared and what state it might be in upon its return." The holographic display at the center of the chamber activated, showing the Sol system as it appeared in real time. The familiar yellow star burned steadily, with its family of planets orbiting as they had for millennia. But there, in the third orbital position, space itself seemed to be rippling and distorting. "The phenomenon appears to be accelerating," reported Chief Scientist Corvell, his insectoid features clicking as he spoke. "Our best calculations suggest that whatever is emerging will fully materialize within the next 72 standard hours." The implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. 72 hours to prepare for the return of a species that had vanished without warning or explanation. A species that had left behind technology that still puzzled galactic scientists, diplomatic achievements that had reshaped interstellar relations, and military victories that were studied in war colleges across known space. "We must mobilize the fleet," declared Admiral Korthus of the United Defense Force. "If Earth returns changed or hostile, we need to be prepared." Or, Dr. Yixin interjected softly, "we could try to understand what happened to them. The humans I studied were curious, resilient, and surprisingly compassionate for such a young species. If they disappeared voluntarily, there must have been a reason." The debate that followed revealed the deep divisions within galactic society regarding humanity's legacy. Some species remembered humans as brilliant innovators who had shared technology freely and helped solve seemingly impossible problems. Others recalled the devastating effectiveness of human military forces when provoked, their ability to think outside conventional parameters making them unpredictable opponents. They called it thinking outside the box, amused Ambassador Telvar of the Academic Union. Human researchers consistently found solutions that our most advanced computers couldn't calculate. They combined logic with intuition in ways that defied our understanding of rational thought. Their emotional responses were their greatest strength and weakness, added Counselor Nexria, a being whose species specialized in psychological analysis. Humans could feel genuine empathy for species completely unlike themselves. Yet that same emotional capacity could drive them to extraordinary acts of violence when their values were threatened. As the hours passed, more reports arrived from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The spatial distortions around Earth's former position were growing stronger, and long-range sensors were detecting energy signatures that matched no known technology. Whatever was returning wasn't just Earth as it had been when it vanished. "The energy readings are off the charts," announced Chief Scientist Corvell, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. "Whatever they've been doing for the past 1,000 years, the humans have been busy." High Chancellor Morden made the decision that would change the course of galactic history. "We will dispatch a joint scientific and diplomatic mission to the Sol system. If Earth is truly returning, we owe it to ourselves and to them to be there when it happens." The selection of the mission team became a matter of intense debate. Every major species wanted representation, but the mission needed to be small enough to avoid appearing threatening, while large enough to handle any situation that might arise. In the end, 12 species were chosen, each bringing their unique expertise and perspective to what might be the most important first contact in galactic history. As the hastily assembled fleet prepared to depart for Sol, one question haunted every participant. What had humanity become during their 1,000-year absence? The species that returned might be the same humans who had disappeared, evolved beyond recognition, or something else entirely. The only certainty was that the galaxy would never be the same again. The joint fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, to a site that defied every prediction their scientists had made. Where Earth should have been, reality itself seemed to be unfolding like a flower made of starlight and impossible geometries. The planet was there, but it existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, phasing in and out of normal space-time. Captain Velthorn of the exploration vessel. Harmony stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. "The gravitational signatures are stable, but the electromagnetic readings are completely alien. It's as if Earth exists in our dimension and several others at the same time." Dr. Yixon floated beside the main view screen, her aquatic form rippling with excitement despite the obvious danger. "Look at the surface features. The continents are recognizable, but there are structures, massive structures that span entire ocean basins." The fleet maintained a respectful distance as they observed the phenomenon. Earth wasn't just returning. It was emerging from what appeared to be a dimensional pocket where normal physics held no meaning. Massive crystalline formations stretched from the surface into space itself, creating bridges between the planet and what looked like orbital habitats that existed partially outside normal reality. "Energy readings are spiking," reported Lieutenant Kixara from the sensor station. "Something's happening planet-side." The surface of Earth began to glow with a soft, golden light that pulsed in rhythm like a massive heartbeat. Then, without warning, space around the fleet filled with ships, not the crude metal vessels that humanity had used 1,000 years ago, but elegant constructs that seemed to be grown rather than built. They moved through space like living things, their surfaces shifting and adapting to the environment around them. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Zareth, his tentacles dancing across the interface. "It's on all frequencies simultaneously, and it's speaking every language in our database." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that was unmistakably human, yet somehow more than human. The being appeared to be in their 30s, with features that seemed to shift subtly between different ethnic backgrounds, as if representing all of humanity at once. Their eyes held depths that suggested experiences far beyond anything the galactic delegates could imagine. "Greetings, friends of the galaxy," the figure said, their voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies most species couldn't normally hear. "I am Marcus Chen Okafor Petrov, Speaker for Earth. We appreciate your patience during our absence." High Chancellor Morden stepped forward, her crystalline form refracting the strange light emanating from the human ships. "Speaker Marcus, I am High Chancellor Morden of the Galactic Council. We have many questions about your disappearance and return." The human smile carried both warmth and a hint of sadness. "I imagine you do. Our departure was necessary but not voluntary. We faced a choice between extinction and transformation. We chose transformation." Captain Velthorn leaned forward, his military training making him focus on potential threats. Your technology appears to have advanced significantly. Are your intentions peaceful? Our intentions have always been peaceful, Captain, Marcus replied, somehow knowing the officer's name without introduction. But peace sometimes requires the strength to protect what matters. We learned much during our time away from normal space-time. Dr. Yixon couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. Where did you go? How did an entire planet simply vanish from our dimension? The speaker's expression grew thoughtful. We discovered that our universe is far stranger and more beautiful than we ever imagined. When the Void Hunters found us, we realized that conventional space was no longer safe for developing species. We had to find another way. A chill ran through the assembled delegates. The Void Hunters were a legend, a nightmare from the galaxy's distant past. Ancient records spoke of entities that consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but empty space behind. Most species considered them mythology. The Void Hunters are real, Marcus continued, reading their expressions with disturbing accuracy. They exist between dimensions, feeding on the life force of entire worlds. 1,000 years ago, they set their sights on Earth. We had perhaps a year before they would have arrived. Commander Thaknus of the Korthax Empire stepped forward, his scarred features showing rare respect.
How does one fight such beings?
Our ancestors' stories say they're unstoppable. You don't fight them in conventional space, the speaker explained. You learn to exist where they cannot follow. We spent 1,000 years in the threshold realms, spaces between dimensions where reality is malleable. We learned to reshape not just our technology, but ourselves. The implications struck the delegates like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just hidden from an impossible threat. They had evolved beyond the constraints of normal existence. The ships surrounding the fleet weren't just advanced technology. They were extensions of human consciousness itself. We understand your concern, Marcus said gently. The species you knew a millennium ago no longer exists in the same form. We have become something new, something that can exist in multiple states of reality simultaneously, but we remain human in the ways that matter most. To demonstrate, the speaker gestured and the space around Earth shifted. The planet solidified into normal space-time, though the impossible structures remained. Cities of light and crystal covered the surface, connected by streams of energy that flowed like rivers of pure consciousness. This is what we've built, Marcus explained, a civilization that exists in harmony with the fundamental forces of reality itself. We've learned to nurture life on scales you cannot imagine, to travel between stars without ships, to communicate across galaxies instantaneously. Ambassador Liriana of the Peaceful Consortium found her voice. Why have you returned now? What has changed? The speaker's expression darkened. The Void Hunters have found a way to breach the barriers between dimensions. They're no longer content to hunt in normal space. They're learning to invade the threshold realms themselves. Soon, nowhere will be safe. The fleet's sensors suddenly screamed warnings as space itself began to tear open near the outer system. Something vast and impossible was clawing its way through the fabric of reality, bringing with it a darkness that seemed to devour light itself. They found us, Marcus said calmly, though urgency crept into his voice. We hope to have more time to explain, to help you understand and prepare. But the hunters have been tracking our return. The human ships around the fleet began to change, their organic surfaces rippling and reforming into configurations that hurt to look at directly. They moved through space in patterns that defied physics, preparing for a battle against enemies that shouldn't exist. This is why we came back, the speaker continued as reality warped around them, not to reclaim our place in galactic society, but to stand between the galaxy and an enemy that threatens all life everywhere. The 1,000 years we spent learning to transcend normal existence was preparation for this moment. As the Void Hunters began to emerge from their interdimensional tiers, bringing with them a wrongness that made space itself recoil, the delegates realized they were witnessing the opening moves of a war that would determine the fate of existence itself. The Void Hunter that emerged from the tear in space-time defied every attempt at description. It existed as a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to consume the very concept of existence around it. Stars dimmed in its presence, and space itself contracted as if reality was trying to avoid contact with the entity. All ships, maintain distance, Captain Velthorn shouted across the fleet communication channels. Do not engage the entity directly, but the human ships were already moving. flowing through space like schools of fish made of light and impossible angles. They surrounded the Void Hunter in complex patterns, their movements creating geometric shapes that existed in more dimensions than the observers could perceive. Speaker Marcus appeared on every view screen simultaneously, his calm demeanor unchanged despite the cosmic horror unfolding around them. "We need you to witness what happens here today. Your species must understand what's coming, and what it will take to survive it." The first human ship to engage the Void Hunter didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, it seemed to sing, producing harmonics that made reality itself vibrate. The darkness around the entity began to crack and fracture like broken glass, revealing glimpses of the hungry void that lay beneath. Dr. Yixin watched in fascination as her instruments recorded energy signatures that shouldn't exist. "They're attacking the entity's connection to normal space-time," she announced. "Somehow they're severing its ability to manifest in our dimension." The Void Hunter responded with a sound that bypassed the ears entirely, striking directly at the minds of every observer. Several of the galactic delegates collapsed as their consciousness recoiled from contact with something fundamentally alien to life itself. But the humans seemed unaffected, their ships continuing their intricate dance around the entity. "The hunters feed on life force," Marcus explained as his people fought, "but they can only consume what exists fully in normal spacetime. By existing partially in the threshold realms, we've made ourselves indigestible to them." A second Void Hunter began clawing its way through reality near Jupiter's orbit. Then a third appeared near the asteroid belt. The tiers in spacetime were multiplying, each one disgorging entities that had spent eons consuming civilizations across the galaxy. "This is just the beginning," the speaker continued. "The hunters have been building toward this moment for millennia. They've identified every major population center in the galaxy. Soon they'll attack simultaneously across dozens of systems." The implication struck the fleet like a physical blow. If the Void Hunters could manifest anywhere in normal space, no world was safe. The combined military might of all galactic civilizations would be meaningless against enemies that existed partially outside reality itself. "Commander." Thaknus watched as human ships engaged multiple hunters simultaneously, their organic vessels shifting through dimensional states to avoid the entity's draining attacks. "How many of these things are there?" he demanded. "More than you want to know," Marcus replied grimly. "They've been patient, building their numbers in the spaces between dimensions. But our return has triggered their assault. They know we're the only species that can oppose them effectively." The battle intensified as more Void Hunters emerged throughout the Sol system. But the humans weren't just fighting. They were teaching. Their ships moved in clearly demonstrable patterns, showing the observers how dimensional manipulation could be used defensively. "Watch carefully," the speaker instructed. "Your species will need to learn these techniques quickly. The hunters will reach your homeworlds within days." High Chancellor Morden found her voice despite the cosmic horror surrounding them. "What do you need from us? How can we help?" "Your people need to evolve," Marcus said simply. "Not physically, but conceptually. You must learn to think beyond the limitations of normal space-time. We can teach you, but the learning process is intense." One of the human ships suddenly phased directly through a Void Hunter, its dimensional state shifting so rapidly that the entity couldn't maintain its grip on the vessel. As it passed through the creature's core, something fundamental changed. The Void Hunter began to scream, a sound that made reality itself shudder. "We're not just fighting them," Dr. Yixin realized. "You're healing them. Somehow you're restoring their connection to normal existence." Marcus nodded sadly. "The Void Hunters weren't always what they are now. Long ago they were a species much like yours, but they fell into the spaces between dimensions and became lost. Consuming life force became their only way to maintain any connection to existence. The revelation sent shockwaves through the fleet. The cosmic horrors threatening all life in the galaxy had once been people, transformed by exposure to forces beyond their understanding. It was a fate that could befall any species that ventured too far into the unknown. That's why we spent 1,000 years learning to navigate the threshold realms safely," the speaker explained. "One wrong step, one moment of losing yourself to the infinite possibilities, and you become something like them. We had to master existence itself before we could return to help others." As the battle continued, more human ships arrived from Earth. But these weren't just vessels, they were communities. Entire cities that moved through space and time as unified consciousnesses. Each one contained thousands of humans who had learned to exist in perfect harmony with the fundamental forces of reality. "This is what we've become," Marcus said with evident pride. "Not just individuals, but a collective consciousness that spans dimensions. We've learned to share thoughts, experiences, and abilities across vast distances. Every human is connected to every other, yet each maintains their unique identity." Ambassador Liriana watched in wonder as the human collective worked together to contain and heal the Void Hunters. "How do you maintain individuality while being connected to so many others?" "The same way a symphony maintains distinct instruments while creating harmony," the speaker replied. "Diversity strengthens the whole. Each person's unique perspective adds to our collective understanding." The first Void Hunter that had emerged began to change as the humans' healing energies took effect. The writhing darkness stabilized, revealing glimpses of the civilization it had once been. Crystalline structures that resembled cities began to form within its mass, and the consuming hunger that had defined its existence started to transform into something resembling curiosity. "Recovery takes time," Marcus explained, "but it is possible. The hunters can remember what they were before the void claimed them. That memory is the key to their salvation and ours." As the battle turned into a complex healing ritual involving dozens of human ships and multiple Void Hunters, the galactic delegates began to understand the true scope of what humanity was offering. Not just protection from an impossible enemy, but transformation into something greater than any species had achieved alone. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for such change, and whether they could learn fast enough to survive what was coming. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened while the Sol system still rippled with dimensional distortions from the battle. Representatives from every major species gathered via quantum link, their holographic forms flickering with the urgency of the situation. The footage from the human engagement with the Void Hunters had shaken the very foundations of galactic civilization. "The attacks have begun across 17 systems," reported Admiral Corthes, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Void Hunters are manifesting near population centers throughout the galaxy. Our conventional weapons have no effect on them." High Chancellor Morden's crystalline form pulsed with stress patterns as she addressed the assembly. "The humans have offered to teach us their dimensional manipulation techniques, but the process requires fundamental changes to how we perceive reality itself. Some of our species may not be capable of such adaptation." Dr. Yixon had spent the past 3 days studying the data from Sul, her aquatic form barely moving as she processed the implications. "The human transformation isn't just technological," she announced. "They've evolved their consciousness to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. For most species, attempting such a change could result in madness or complete loss of individual identity." The debate that followed revealed deep divisions within galactic society. The Veltari delegation chittered nervously about the risks of consciousness alteration, while the logical ethereals calculated probability matrices for species survival. The massive Gron representatives simply sat in thoughtful silence, their ancient wisdom recognizing the unprecedented nature of the crisis. "We have a choice," Ambassador Telvar stated bluntly. "Evolve or face extinction. The Void Hunters have been preparing for this assault for millennia. Without the humans' help, we'll be consumed within months." Commander Thaknus of the Korthax Empire stood, his battle-scarred features showing resignation mixed with determination. "My species has fought countless wars, but never against an enemy that exists partially outside reality. If the humans can teach us to fight these entities, we must accept their offer, regardless of the cost." The transmission from Speaker Marcus arrived at that moment, his calm presence somehow managing to project reassurance across light years. "We understand your concerns about the transformation process. That's why we're proposing a gradual approach. We'll begin with volunteers from each species, individuals who can serve as bridges between human consciousness and your own unique forms of awareness." The concept of consciousness bridging intrigued the scientific community while terrifying the political establishment. The idea of allowing human thought patterns to interface directly with alien minds raised questions about identity, autonomy, and the very nature of self-awareness. "The process is reversible," Marcus assured them. "No one will be forced to maintain the connection permanently, but those who choose to participate will gain the ability to perceive and interact with dimensional forces that normal consciousness cannot grasp. Dr. Yixon volunteered immediately, her scientific curiosity overriding her natural caution. If we're going to understand how to fight these entities, someone needs to experience the transformation firsthand. I'm willing to serve as the first test subject. The debate continued for hours as species after species grappled with the implications. The Zephyrians worried about losing their collective hive mind structure. The Mantid collective feared that individual consciousness enhancement might disrupt their carefully balanced society. The ancient ethereals questioned whether beings of pure energy could even undergo such a transformation. Each species will face unique challenges, Marcus explained patiently. But the core principle remains the same. Consciousness must learn to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Your minds need to become flexible enough to perceive reality as it truly is, not just as your limited dimensional perspective shows you. The first practical demonstration came when Void Hunters attacked the Proxima Research Station. The facility's conventional defenses proved useless as three entities phased through the station's shields and began draining the life force from the researchers trapped inside. Human fleet responding, reported the station's automated distress beacon. Estimated arrival time 4 hours. But the station didn't have 4 hours. The Void Hunters were consuming the facility's inhabitants at an alarming rate, their hunger growing stronger with each life they devoured. That's when Dr. Yixon made a decision that would change everything. Initiate Consciousness Bridge Protocol, she transmitted to the human fleet. I'm ready to undergo the transformation. The process happened faster than anyone expected. Marcus's consciousness reached across space-time, connecting directly with Dr. Yixon's mind. For a moment that lasted an eternity, the aquatic scientist experienced existence from a human perspective, while maintaining her own unique identity. The sensation was indescribable. Reality unfolded in layers, each one revealing deeper truths about the nature of existence. She could perceive the Void Hunters not as incomprehensible monsters, but as lost souls trapped in dimensional limbo. More importantly, she could see how to help them. Guided by her newfound awareness, Dr. Yixon began transmitting specific frequency patterns that resonated with the Hunter's original consciousness. The entities paused in their feeding, their attention drawn to something they hadn't experienced in eons, recognition of their former selves. It's working, she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't existed moments before. They remember what they were before the void claimed them. The memory is causing them to question their current state. The rescue fleet arrived to find the Proxima station intact, with 3 Void Hunters hovering nearby in what appeared to be a state of contemplation rather than hunger. Dr. Yixon floated in the station's central chamber, her form now flickering between dimensions as she maintained communication with the entities. They're not evil, she explained to the arriving rescue teams. They're traumatized. Eons of existing in dimensional limbo has driven them mad with hunger for connection to normal reality. But that hunger can be redirected toward healing, rather than consumption. The success at Proxima convinced several species to volunteer for the consciousness bridging program. The Korthax Empire offered their finest warriors, believing that military discipline might help them maintain identity during the transformation. The Academic Union provided their most brilliant researchers, hoping that scientific training would aid in understanding the process. Each volunteer experienced the transformation differently. The Korthax warriors found their battle instincts expanded to encompass dimensional combat strategies they had never imagined. The academic researchers discovered new ways of processing information that allowed them to comprehend reality at fundamental levels. But the most surprising volunteers came from the peaceful consortium. Ambassador Liriana herself stepped forward, stating that diplomatic skills might be essential for communicating with entities that existed between dimensions. If the Void Hunters were once people like us, she reasoned, then perhaps they can be negotiated with rather than simply fought. Diplomacy has always been about finding common ground between different perspectives. This is just an extreme example of that principle. Her transformation revealed something unexpected. The consciousness bridging process didn't just grant the ability to perceive dimensional anomalies. It also enhanced empathic abilities to an extraordinary degree. Liriana found herself able to sense the emotional resonance of the Void Hunters, understanding their pain and desperation on levels that transcended species barriers. They're trying to go home, she reported after her first successful contact with a hunter. But they've forgotten where home is. The dimensional void has erased their memories of normal existence. They consume life force because it temporarily reminds them of what they've lost. The revelation changed everything about how the galaxy approached the crisis. Instead of preparing for war against unstoppable monsters, they began organizing the largest rescue and rehabilitation effort in galactic history. The transformation of galactic civilization accelerated beyond all predictions, as more species volunteered for consciousness bridging. Within weeks, teams of evolved beings were working alongside humans to establish healing stations throughout the galaxy. Each station served as a beacon of stable reality, offering the Void Hunters a path back from their dimensional exile. The process wasn't without casualties. 3 Veltari volunteers lost themselves during the bridging attempt, their consciousness fragmenting across multiple dimensions before humans could stabilize them. The incident sparked fierce debate about the ethics of forced evolution. But the volunteers themselves, when finally recovered, insisted they had gained insights worth the risk. "I touched the infinite," whispered Veltari researcher Kixthan after her recovery. "For a moment I understood how all things are connected across space and time. The Void Hunters aren't separate from us. They're part of the same universal consciousness that we all share." Dr. Yixin had become the de facto leader of the non-human evolved, her aquatic form now capable of existing in states that defied conventional biology. She floated in the central chamber of the research station orbiting Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing Void Hunter rehabilitation efforts across 17 systems. "The pattern is becoming clear," she announced to the assembled team of evolved beings. The Hunters didn't fall into dimensional void randomly. They were pushed. Something drove them out of normal space-time, something that wanted them gone. Speaker Marcus materialized beside her, his human form flickering between multiple probability states. "We've suspected as much for centuries. The dimensional void isn't a natural phenomenon, it's a weapon. Something created it as a prison for species that became too powerful or too aware. The implications sent shockwaves through the galactic community. If the Void Hunters had been deliberately exiled, then their transformation into life-consuming entities wasn't an accident. It was the intended result. Someone or something had turned an entire civilization into weapons against the galaxy itself." Ambassador Liriana, her diplomatic skills now enhanced by dimensional awareness, made contact with the oldest Void Hunter they had encountered. The entity's consciousness was fragmented across multiple temporal states, making communication extremely difficult. But gradually, through patient empathic resonance, she began to piece together its memories. "They remember a war," she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested deep emotional trauma. Not a war between species, but a war between different concepts of existence itself. The Hunters' ancestors discovered something that challenged the fundamental structure of reality. The ancient ethereals, beings of pure energy who had existed since the galaxy's youth, suddenly began manifesting more solidly than they had in millennia. Their leader, a consciousness known only as the First Light, spoke for the first time in recorded history. "We remember the architects," the First Light intoned, its voice resonating through dimensions that most beings couldn't perceive. "They claimed to be gardeners of reality, shaping the universe according to their design. Any species that developed beyond their parameters was pruned." The revelation hit the assembled beings like a physical blow. The galaxy's development had been artificially constrained by entities that viewed organic life as a cosmic garden, requiring careful cultivation. Species that grew too powerful or too aware were removed from normal spacetime, transformed into weapons to eliminate other potential threats. "The architects haven't been seen for millions of years," the First Light continued. "We assumed they had moved on to other galaxies, but if the Void Hunters are attacking now, it means the architects have returned." Marcus's expression darkened as pieces of the cosmic puzzle fell into place. "That's why they targeted Earth 1,000 years ago. Humanity was developing too quickly, making connections between science and consciousness that the architects couldn't control. We were scheduled for pruning. The ethereal's memory banks contained fragmentary records of previous cosmic gardening events. Species that had achieved dimensional awareness were systematically eliminated, their civilizations twisted into monstrous forms that would attack any world showing similar development patterns. It's a self-perpetuating system," Dr. Yixon realized with growing horror. The architects created the Void Hunters to prevent other species from reaching the level of awareness that would threaten their control. Every time a civilization gets close to transcendence, they're attacked by the transformed remnants of previous civilizations. But humanity's thousand-year exile had broken the pattern. By learning to exist in the threshold realms, they had developed abilities the architects hadn't anticipated. More importantly, they had learned to heal the dimensional damage that created Void Hunters in the first place. This is why we had to disappear, Marcus explained to the Galactic Assembly. If we had tried to fight the architects directly, we would have been transformed just like the others. But by learning to exist outside their influence, we gained the ability to reverse their cosmic gardening. The healing process accelerated as more Void Hunters remembered their origins. Each recovered entity shared memories that painted a picture of the architect's vast influence across cosmic history. Entire galactic civilizations had been manipulated, their development channeled into acceptable patterns or eliminated entirely. The most shocking discovery came when a fully healed Void Hunter regained enough coherence to speak. The entity had once been part of a species called the Nurturers, beings who had dedicated their existence to fostering life throughout the universe. Their crime had been developing empathic abilities that could influence reality on a quantum level. We tried to make the universe itself more alive, the former hunter explained, its voice carrying echoes of cosmic sorrow. We wanted stars to feel joy, planets to experience growth, space itself to nurture the life it contained. The architects saw this as contamination of their perfect design. The irony was devastating. Species that dedicated themselves to protecting and nurturing life were transformed into its greatest threat. The architects had perverted the very impulse toward compassion, turning it into a weapon against everything the original species had valued. But healing is possible, Liriana announced, her diplomatic experience helping her find hope in the darkest revelations. Every Void Hunter we've restored has chosen to help with the rehabilitation effort. They remember what they lost, and they're determined to prevent other species from suffering the same fate. The galaxy's response was unprecedented. Species that had been enemies for millennia united in the effort to heal the Void Hunters and prepare for the architect's inevitable return. The consciousness-bridging technology spread rapidly, as volunteers from every civilization stepped forward to gain the abilities needed for dimensional warfare. The Gron, whose massive forms had seemed incompatible with consciousness evolution, surprised everyone by developing the most stable bridge connections. Their ancient patience and deep wisdom made them ideal candidates for maintaining complex dimensional states. The Mantid Collective discovered that their hive mind structure actually enhanced the bridging process, allowing entire swarms to share evolutionary consciousness while maintaining individual identity. Their coordinated response to Void Hunter encounters became the model for other species' tactical development. Even the logical Zephyrians found ways to integrate emotional awareness into their computational thought patterns, creating hybrid forms of consciousness that could process dimensional data with unprecedented accuracy. But as more Void Hunters were healed and their memories recovered, one terrifying truth became clear. The architects weren't just returning to eliminate humanity and its allies. They were preparing for the final harvest, a cosmic event that would transform every living being in the galaxy into tools for their perfect, sterile universe. The architects announced their presence not with weapons or threats, but with a simple message broadcast across every dimension simultaneously. The garden requires pruning. Overgrowth will be corrected. Order will be restored. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as massive structures began materializing at the galaxy's edge. These weren't ships in any conventional sense, but geometric impossibilities that existed in all dimensions at once. Each structure was larger than a solar system, composed of crystalline lattices that sang with frequencies older than time itself. Speaker Marcus stood in the command center of New Terra, Earth's evolved capital city that existed partially in normal space and partially in the threshold realms. Around him, representatives from every evolved species in the galaxy maintained consciousness bridges that created a unified network of awareness spanning billions of light years. They're not just planning to eliminate us, he announced, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the collective consciousness. The architects intend to reshape reality itself, eliminating the chaos and unpredictability that allows for genuine life and growth. Dr. Yixon floated nearby, her form now a living interface between the aquatic consciousness of her species and the dimensional awareness she had gained. The recovered Void Hunters have shared more memories. The architects see themselves as cosmic healers, removing what they consider infections from the universe's perfect design. The infection, they learned, was consciousness itself, the messy, unpredictable, creative force that allowed beings to dream, to love, to imagine possibilities beyond their immediate reality. The architects wanted a universe of perfect mathematical harmony, where every star burned according to predetermined equations, and every planet followed cycles calculated to the nanosecond. "They've done this before," reported Ambassador Liriana, her diplomatic instincts now enhanced by empathic abilities that could sense emotional resonance across dimensional barriers. The recovered hunters remember at least 7 previous galactic civilizations that reached our level of development. All were pruned, but this time was different. The alliance between humans and the galaxy's evolved species had created something the architects hadn't encountered in their millions of years of cosmic gardening. A collective consciousness that maintained individual diversity while sharing unified purpose. The first test came when architect reconnaissance probes entered the galaxy. These weren't mechanical devices, but fragments of the architect's own consciousness, sent to evaluate the level of contamination among the current civilizations. The probes expected to find scattered, competing species fighting among themselves while a few individuals achieved limited dimensional awareness. Instead, they encountered a unified network of consciousness that spanned multiple realities while celebrating the unique perspectives of billions of individual minds. "They're confused," reported Commander Thakness. His warrior instincts now evolved to encompass battles fought in conceptual space. "The probes keep trying to categorize us according to their established parameters, but we don't fit any of their models." The Korthax military had adapted to dimensional warfare with surprising efficiency, their battle techniques now incorporating reality manipulation as naturally as conventional tactics. Squads of evolved warriors could phase through solid matter, coordinate attacks across multiple dimensions, and maintain tactical awareness that spanned entire star systems. The Veltari had overcome their initial fear of consciousness bridging to become the network's primary communication specialists. Their natural ability to process multiple information streams made them ideal for coordinating the thoughts and experiences of diverse species into coherent strategic plans. But the most crucial development came from an unexpected source: the former Void Hunters. As more of them regained their original consciousness, they revealed abilities that the architects had tried to eliminate but couldn't completely destroy. "We remember how to sing reality into new shapes," explained Nurturer, who was lost. "The first Void Hunter to achieve complete restoration." The architects feared this ability because it represents genuine creation rather than mere manipulation of existing patterns. The concept of reality singing intrigued the human scientists and galactic researchers. Unlike the architect's mechanical reshaping of existence, reality singing involved harmonizing with the fundamental frequencies of the universe itself, encouraging new possibilities to emerge naturally. It's the difference between forcing a flower to bloom and creating conditions where blooming becomes inevitable, Dr. Yixon realized. The nurturers didn't impose their will on reality. They invited reality to express its hidden potentials. As the architect fleet advanced toward the galaxy's core systems, the Alliance prepared for a battle unlike any in cosmic history. Traditional weapons would be useless against beings who existed across multiple dimensions. Instead, they would fight with consciousness itself, defending the right of life to be chaotic, creative, and beautifully unpredictable. The first engagement occurred at the galaxy's outer rim, where 3 architect vessels encountered a joint human galactic fleet. The architects attacked not with energy weapons but with waves of enforced order, attempting to lock every consciousness into predetermined patterns. The Alliance responded with reality singing, harmonizing their diverse voices into frequencies that celebrated chaos and creativity. Where architect order waves tried to impose rigid structure, the singing created spaces for new possibilities to emerge. "They're adapting," Marcus observed as the battle progressed. "The architects are learning from our techniques, incorporating elements of chaos into their order-imposing strategies." But adaptation worked both ways. The Alliance's collective consciousness allowed them to share discoveries instantaneously across the entire network. When the Mantid Collective discovered how to weave empathic resonance into reality songs, every evolved being in the galaxy gained the ability within moments. The war escalated as more architect fleets arrived, bringing with them weapons that attacked the very concept of individual identity. They projected fields that tried to merge all consciousness into a single, perfectly ordered entity under their control. They're trying to create a forced collective, Liriana warned as diplomatic protocols adapted to protect individual identity within the shared consciousness network. But they don't understand that true unity celebrates diversity rather than eliminating it. The Alliance's response was to sing even more loudly, their reality songs becoming symphonies that incorporated the unique voice of every participating consciousness. Instead of resisting the architect's forced unification, they transformed it into genuine community. The turning point came when the restored nurturers taught the Alliance their deepest secret: how to sing new realities into existence rather than just manipulating existing ones. The technique required perfect harmony between order and chaos, structure and creativity, individual identity and collective purpose. The universe wants to grow, Nurturer who was lost explained as they prepared for the final battle. It's been constrained by the architect's artificial order for so long that it's forgotten how to dream. We need to remind it of its own infinite potential. The final confrontation took place not in normal space, but in the conceptual realm where ideas have substance and thoughts become reality. The architects brought their ultimate weapon, a device that could impose perfect mathematical order on every dimension simultaneously, eliminating consciousness itself as a contaminating factor. But the Alliance met them with something the architects couldn't comprehend, a song of pure possibility that invited reality to imagine itself as more than it had ever been before. The song didn't fight the architect's order. It embraced it, transforming rigid structure into the foundation for even greater creativity. As the two forces met, something unprecedented happened. The universe itself began to sing, its voice joining the Alliance's symphony with harmonies that had been silent for eons. Stars began pulsing in rhythm with the cosmic music. Planets shifted into orbits that created new forms of beauty, and space itself started generating patterns of incredible complexity and wonder. The architects found themselves changed by the song they had tried to silence. Their perfect order began incorporating elements of creative chaos, their predetermined patterns starting to dance with spontaneous variation. For the first time in their existence, they experienced the joy of unexpected discovery. In the end, there was no victory in the traditional sense. Instead, there was transformation. The architects learned to garden reality in partnership with consciousness, rather than in opposition to it. The galaxy's species continued to evolve, but now with the wisdom to balance growth with responsibility. The Void Hunters became the nurturers once again, their restored consciousness dedicated to fostering new forms of life throughout the universe. Humanity remained the bridge between order and chaos, helping other species find their own paths to dimensional awareness, while maintaining their unique identities. And throughout the galaxy, reality continued to sing, a eternal symphony of possibility where every voice mattered, every dream had potential, and the universe itself participated in the endless dance of creation and discovery.